Dear all, I'm very glad that I will be moderating this discussion, this final discussion, entitled The Human Universe. My guests are Professor Claude Dowiedz and Professor Michał Heller. I'm sure that I don't have to introduce them to you, neither to our audience in front of laptops and mobiles, but let me do this symbolic gesture. Professor Dowiedz is a French historical economist. In his research, he deals with cliometrics, or cliometrics as some pronounce this word, and holds important positions in many academic institutions. He is also the author of numerous articles and books on historical economy. Professor Michał Heller is a theoretical physicist, philosopher, theologian, and historian of philosophy, of physics, and of mathematics. He is the author of some, my voice always trembles when I express the number of his publications. He is the author of some 70 books and founder of the Copernicus Center for Interdisciplinary Research. It would take several hours to list all the academic and non-academic positions these two gentlemen occupy, so I will stop here and limit my presentation to only these few details. The title of our discussion, The Human Universe, can be understood in several ways, but I guess the dominant one is probably the underlying assumption that the primary measure for the universe and of the universe is man. But I would prefer, for the purpose of this discussion, to replace the assertion with a question about the universe and man's place in it. And we will try to answer these questions from different perspectives, cosmology, philosophy, economy, economics. I asked my guests to prepare short presentations to begin with, and so they could give us an insight into their ways of thinking. So let's start with this. Professor Heller, the stage is yours. Let's invite them with some cheers.
Thank you. I shall try to speak slowly because of the acoustic of this room. I think that in discussions and interpretations surrounding science and philosophy of science, now there is something which can be called human complex. Since Copernican revolution, this human complex is clearly evident in discussions around science. By this human complex, I understand various processes and procedures leading to the restoration of man's distinguished place in the universe, which Copernicus deprived him of. The progress of science was made possible at the beginning of modern times because of the removal of the knowing subject from the scientific method. This process was at the beginning invisible, but it was a necessary condition for the development of classical mechanics, young biological sciences, and so on. The human subject was removed from the scientific method. it was almost from the beginning obvious that concepts of methods of science in general are human-made. But only recently we start to understand more deeply that there is a specific relationship between the researcher and the studying object. Modern contemporary philosophy of science is discovering this interaction between the researcher and the scientific object in various aspects of doing science. And we start to understand, and in part we discover that the process of studying the world establishes this relationship between researcher and the studying object. And this is applied not only on the smallest scale, for instance, in the problem of quantum measurements, but also on the cosmic scale. For instance, all the dispute about anthropic principle, they were discussed during this Congress as well. In August 1973, half a century ago, there was here in Krakow an International Assembly of International Astronomical Union, also devoted to Copernicus after 500 years of his birth. And I had a privilege and chance to participate in this symposium. And I remember, at that time I was in the lecture room, it was John Archibald Wheeler who chaired the session. And during the discussion, he asked Brandon Carton, who was present among the audience, to present his ideas about the place of man in the universe. And Brandon Carton agreed to do that, but he asked 1 or 2 days to prepare, to organize his ideas. And after next day or day after, he indeed presented a talk, a special talk on the anthropic principle. And at that time, the anthropic principle was born, at least for the general public, because before that, during some seminars in Princeton, already Brandon Carter discussed these ideas. But here he presented them, and in the proceedings of that symposium, there is his talk about the anthropic principle. And this talk is now very well known, and as we all know, he formulated 2 anthropic principles, weak anthropic principle and strong anthropic principle. Weak anthropic principle stated that we observe the universe from a special place and a special epoch in time in which human observers could exist. So the place and time from which we observe the universe is not just casual, because in other places, in other epochs, we would not be able to exist. The strong anthropic principle, I will quote exactly what he formulated it, how he formulated it. The universe must be such as to admit observers at some stage in its evolution. The universe must be such as to admit, must be such. And this suggested a teleological interpretation of that principle, that the universe had a goal to produce the universe. And many people interpreted this in a strong formulation of anthropic principle in this way. But it was not intended by Brandon Carter. His intention was quite different. His idea was in the form, could be presented in the form of the reasoning countercurrent in the back direction. We are here, we intelligent observers are here, so in the beginning the initial conditions of the universe had to be such that intelligent being in the universe, at least on the one planet, could exist. So it was not a teleological interpretation, but his intended meaning was just sort of countercurrent reasoning. It's very similarly to other cosmological tests, for instance. Very powerful observational test in astronomy, in cosmology, is the microwave background radiation. And of course, the existence of microwave background radiation falsifies all cosmological models which do not admit the existence of this radiation field. In the same way, since we are here, so all cosmological models in which there are no conditions for the biological evolution are ruled out, are falsified. This was intended meaning of the strong anthropic principle. Afterwards, there were many formulations and variations of anthropic principles, but all of them were more or less variations with the same topic. There were some other far-reaching formulations like of a kind of metaphysical character, like the formulation by John Archibald Wheeler, his so-called participatory anthropic principle, which said that the universe exists because it is observed by us. And then the big discussion, which, as our Congress testifies, lasts till today. And now, during this debate, I would like to propose my own formulation, a new formulation of the anthropic principle. I would call it the structural anthropic principle. And it is about the question, what structure must the universe have in order for biological evolution to take place in it? I will repeat. What structure must the universe have in order for biological evolution to take place in it? I will develop a little bit the ideas behind this formulation. We could agree that any living system, whether based on carbon chemistry or other sort of chemistries, must be a dynamical system in the sense used by modern physics. The concept of dynamical system is very, very general, and we may suspect that if life exists somewhere in the universe, it also must be a dynamical system. What is a dynamical system? It consists of three elements. First is a set of states the system can occupy, and this is called the space of states. The second condition for a system to be dynamical system is the existence of time in which the system evolves. And the third element, successive states the system occupies must be dynamically related to each other. That is to say, one state of the system must follow from the previous one dynamically. It must be a result, effect of the previous one. And how to understand that? There must be a dynamical system of equations in the mathematical sense which model this dynamical nexus between successive states. And usually this dynamics is modeled by a set of dynamical equations. They are called dynamical equations. And sometimes this set of equations is called simply dynamical system, and the existence of time and the state of space are usually supposed tacitly that they exist. From the mathematical point of view, this set of equations must describe a system which is non-linear in the mathematical sense, open, so there is an exchange of energy between the system and the environment, and must be far of thermodynamical equilibrium, because if it is in equilibrium, it is already dead. And I must stress that biological evolution meets all these three conditions. There is a set of states the biological system must have. By biological system, by the way, I understand the entire biosphere in its evolution, or even a single organism. So there is a set of states, there is a time in which a system evolves, and of course there must be a dynamical nexus between the states. And in many cases already, biological cases, we have mathematical equations which model a given evolution of a given cell or some simple organism. Of course, we are unable to model evolution of the entire biosphere, but in principle, it is also a dynamical system. What about natural selection, which is a very important element of biological evolution? Of course, natural selection may be built into the interaction between the initial conditions of a given set of equations and a sensibility to the variations of external fluctuations. So even natural selection can be an element of a dynamical system. This is about how life behaves from the point of view of physical sciences. And now, the next question. What conditions must the universe meet for evolution in this sense, in this dynamical sense, be possible? And my answer is rather obvious. The universe, or at least a large part of it, must be itself a dynamical system. The universe must be itself a dynamical system. As we know, the universe is governed by Einstein equations. And perhaps in this context, strangely enough, Einstein equations are not the dynamical system in the mathematical sense, but they can be put into such a form. They can be put into the form of a dynamical system, provided under the condition that certain rigorous conditions are satisfied. Among these conditions, there is an existence of cosmological time, which in general need not to exist. And this time must be a genuine dynamical variable. This is a great chapter of relativistic physics, how to put Einstein equations into a dynamical form, and many theoretical works are done on it for many, many years even. Of course, many other conditions must be met by biological system in order to evolve, to give us a living cell. like, for instance, initial conditions, chemical composition, special values of physical constants, etc., and other formulations of the anthropic principle usually take care of them. They say that there must be fine-tuning in the initial conditions in order to create conditions in the universe for a niche for the biological evolution. The evolution of the universe is a necessary environment. The evolution of the universe is a necessary environment for biological evolution, and vice versa, it imposes strong constraints on possible cosmological models. So it fulfills a role of test, also an observational test. The life exists, at least on the one planet, therefore, universe must be such as to admit such a possibility. Among other conditions, it must be a dynamical system. Which conditions life imposes on the universe? First of all, and it's a main condition, the laws of physics cannot be any, but must allow for the existence of such places and times in the universe in which non-linear, open, dynamical system far from equilibrium can exist. Not only initial conditions have to be fine-tuned to life, but also laws of physics themselves must be such as to be biased for life. In this sense, life have cosmic dimensions. Life is a phenomenon of cosmic significance. Thank you.
Professor Heller, thank you very much for the presentation. Claude, it's your turn now.
So thank you so much, and I'm happy to see that you are still a large crowd for this final session of this wonderful Congress. I see my presentation this afternoon about human universe, or maybe also about humanity, as more or less a follow-up of these 3 days of great talks and discussions we had all together. And let me just thank, on my side, all these people behind the scene who helped me to understand your national language. They did really a great job, and I enjoyed following also the discussions in your language, in Polish, and this was really important for me. In following and discussing about, and in listening to all of you, that may be a little bit strange for you, but I reformulated more or less my talk, and I came to the conclusion that the main problem we have to address, or here for your country, or in the long run, is to come back. Yesterday we had this discussion at the beginning, and this morning again. It may sound crazy for you, but the great question is, and I will build my presentation on this, and I go back to really the beginning of humanity, is for your country, should we join the Eurozone? And this is the question I want to come back later on for your country. And I think that could be really interesting, and to see that even for you, the decision, or in economic terms, the really important decision you have to make is the result of a long history, of a long process, and maybe the process of humanity who brings us to make now, to come back to the past and try to build for you and even for all of us the future of your country, and other points I want to mention. So Here you see I really tried to make an interesting exercise to say, imagine that humans appear on Earth at midnight. And since midnight, more or less, 24 hours passed, more or less, and I tried to fix the several evolutions of humanity or the human universe linked to what the previous speaker told, probably also with physical laws. And if you are looking about this, about the dating, could be really interesting. You see at the very beginning nothing happens, more or less. We are living in a predatory economy. So I fix it especially in a very human economic history, but you can see it in a very larger point of view. And then, long time after, even only at 10 p.m. in the day, humanity begins with the process of domestication of fire. So this is a very long process. And then, I will keep it short, we can come back to this topic later on in the discussion if you want to follow up. It's quite interesting that more or less the really break before that there was a transition to agricultural and sedentary society, but the real break appeared at 1159, more or less, with the Industrial Revolution. So what we are living since the Industrial Revolution is more or less the last minute of humanity, who's still going on. And what we try to explain or to understand now, even for the future, is this last minute. And here I want to follow up with your presentation. And probably this last minute for the human universe, for all of us, is as important now with all the things that are going on, with the climate change, other things, as important as the first second, or even less than the first second in physics or maybe in astrophysics. And trying in the very long process to explain why there was an evolutionary process on humanity who came to this level, and is there another level you can fix forward, it's quite interesting. And in taking all this into account and linked to that, I had pleasure in reading again Adam Smith's 1759, the theory of moral sentiments. It's quite interesting because one of the lessons in this book is if a society wants to survive, and you can fix this for your country, for the others, there are two main points at the beginning. It's justice and prudence. But later on, if you want to survive, and then I will catch up with my idea, should you join the Eurozone or not, there is also a problem of sympathy, of empathy in humanity. There is also linked to you a problem of self-interest. And sometimes in economics we call this utility. And in philosophy, probably the guy who made the first work about this, but I speak under your control, is David Hume, who put this also forward in the topic. And all this brings us more or less in the process of the evolution of humanity. I say this process is always linked, more or less for me, with 5 major points. That's lead probably by aptitudes, to learn new things, to want to progress, by attitudes, that's also linked to humans, by motivation. Some people have spirit, others have less spirit in doing several things, and probably also by the long process to be able to convince others about several things and to do several things in the right way. And in saying this, we come always back to what we try to do also in economics, to the decision process. And sometimes I say the main important point we have to address in science, I don't know if you agree with that, is to fix the problem of causality. And in economics, it's much more difficult. We don't have laws as you have in physics. We have, in theory, the cause is before the effect. And in doing this, we try to also to improve the decision process to make better policy recommendations to help to build the future. So in this long process, there is now probably a big deal in several things. And if you allow me to take the experiment or the case study of now just to mention your country and the European Union in several things, there could also be a question. What is the future of the European, I use now the European Empire? Is the European Empire for the next years, for the next decades, or for the next century stable enough to join or not? For human history, should we study this in a very, you could study the war that is going on, you can study this in terms of cycles, business cycles, relatively long. This morning was mentioned also the growth theories, the cycle theories, the Kondratiev was mentioned. Are we going in a new wave with the digital revolution and other things? These points are all important. Or should you join, or is Europe just engaging a new process like the Roman Empire? And this is also a slow process, and at the end there will be a change in civilization, even for us and humans. And do you have an interest here in Poland to join this story? Linked to the first day, we spoke about Copernicus and his famous paper in 1526 about money. So you can also address this for your country, I think. Is there good money and bad money? If I may be provocative, is the zloty a bad money and the euro a good money to join up? Is there good growth and bad growth to economic growth to join? I think Poland is doing quite well at this. The main major point probably is much more to ask the questions, are there good institutions or bad institutions? Are the institutions organized as rent-seeking institutions, or are they really market-oriented? Are they open? Are they closed? And all these points should be really interesting. I remember yesterday was quite a complex discussion also to say, should we join? It's probably a winning game, utility. We are coming back to Adam Smith about this. Utility, self-interest in economics. That's probably a winning game in the short run. But hey guys, if we have all this, what's in the long run? Do we are strong enough to be to have our sovereignty and to build our nation as we want, or are we blocked with the others? And here reminds me more or less the growth theories. If you decide, if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm engaged in no political debate about this, I would say, if you are moving forward, don't be too shy and be sure that you are good enough to have a good starting point. As in the growth models, if your starting point is, you miss the starting point, you will have no externalities. And you will have no convergence in the long run, and you will be more or less the loser of the game, and not absolutely the winner of the game. And in managing this, to come back with the big questions in this transition, probably also, if you do this, the first question probably to be asked, is this really an economic necessity? Is this a political wish? Or is this really the motivation of most of the people who are living in this country who to catch up, to build something new and to contribute to a new European empire in the very long run, who can survive with all the other civilization changes. That's sometimes difficult to fix. I see this also through my lectures, because thinking like this, that means you are thinking over the life cycle of a human, or of a lot of humans. And through history, I don't have enough time here to develop this, you will see there have been several civilization changes. And to understand them, or to make them conscious, could also be really interesting to come to the decision to join or not to join. And at the end, to be one of the countries, or in the previous panel we had this, or to finish more as isolate with main problems inside the country was probably also not a solution. Coming back to history, what was your own history in the past is probably also not possible or not useful, but all these points, I think, are closely linked in the evolutionary process of what is the human universe. And you see, more or less, when I plot this with the dating by other people in science who put this also forward, we are nothing. So what I'm claiming is much more humanity between all of us, and probably if there is a human universe, there should be also humanity in this human universe to build something together and not to exclude always each other in this long process here for me in an economic history or economic growth process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claude. It's not an easy task to combine a reflection on the anthropic principle and a reflection about Poles joining European zone of currency. Of course, I could say that we can summarize it with one sentence, that everything in the universe has been from the very beginning aiming at humans to appear, then Poles to separate from all other humans, and then for Poles to join Eurozone, but it will not do the job. So I'll try to ask a few questions to both of our panelists, and then I will just ask you to join in, because I think that both of these presentations were really inspiring and thought-provoking. So the first question for both of you would be as follows. I'm asking this question referring to what Professor Heller said at the beginning of the presentation. The relationship between the researcher and the world has long occupied a key place in philosophy of science. Since the turn of the 20th century, awareness of this mutual entanglement has been constantly present in methodological reflections. Some try to objectify it, objectify scientific research, weakening the influence of the human factor on its results, while others stress that we are unable to overcome correlationism, according to which cognition always depends on the subject of cognition. From the perspective of your fields, how do you approach this problem? How do you try to solve this problem, eliminate this problem from your work?
Perhaps one could answer this question in 2 steps. The first step is personal, how I see that from my subjective perspective when I am doing science. And indeed, of course, when I am solving a certain problem, let's say mathematical problem, then I am totally engaged in that problem. I am not thinking about philosophical consequences. But sometimes I pause, especially when some work has been finished, or perhaps just to have a break. I think about that, and I personally feel, indeed, the fact that this problem is overwhelming me. It's something bigger than I am, even if it is a very concrete, small scientific problem. But it is something independent on me. I am struggling with it to have a solution. Sometimes I fail and I do not find the solution. But nevertheless, it is some sort of objective thing. And on the other hand, I feel that I am part of that problem. It is not outside myself. The problem engages myself. I am inside that problem. And this is what makes doing science a little bit mystical and certainly fascination. This is from the first step from my subjective perspective. The second step is how it is looked from the perspective of the philosophy of science, which takes science of something as science for philosophers of science is an objective reality, and he or she tries to understand the science itself. And as we know, and as I said also in my talk, science was dehumanized in classical science. And it was this complex of man in the science. But, and this is why when the man or humanity appeared on the margin of cosmology in anthropic principle, this is why these anthropic principles became so fascinating for general public and for scientists themselves. Another place in which man suddenly, so to speak, appeared unexpectedly was in quantum mechanics. It turned out that the observer and the act of measurement is something which is a part of this discipline. There were some interpretations of quantum mechanics which demanded the existence of measuring subject. It was Erwin Schrödinger who beautifully summarized this dehumanization process in science. He said that in the sciences we can think about the universe without thinking about our thinking of the universe. We can think about the universe without thinking about that we are thinking about the universe. And Schrödinger himself was a part of the discovering quantum mechanics. And in quantum mechanics, it turned out that it's not quite possible to think about the universe without the thinking about somebody who tries to make measurements. So this is how this process of discovering humanity, so to speak, in the sciences was present in the philosophy of science. And we are still now struggling with this problem. In the philosophy of science, very broadly speaking, there are two main streams. One is there is an empirical, analytical philosophy of science which tries to, reduce everything to what can be measured through the result of measurements. And if man is appearing in that approach, it is on the far distant margins of science, of methodological problems. Another is a more continental way of doing philosophy of science, which tries to incorporate into the process of understanding science also the human creativity. This is my short comment to your question. Not an answer, but just comment.
Thank you, Claude. How that this problem is perceived from within your field, economics?
Yes, maybe a few words about this, about economics, and if I may also allow me the way I see the problem myself, and in a general perspective, I think I'm still fighting these days to maintain in economics, especially, theory. And I'm fighting really for this. And as you mentioned, cliometrics, the big debate about this, even with the other human and social sciences, was not absolutely the use of metrics, but it was the use of theory. If you want to apply theory, for example, in ancient history, that becomes a problem. Could you apply neoclassical theory in a society who worked according to Finlay, etc., who evolved in a status society much more than a market society, something like this? Theory was always a problem. But I think if you want, our job is to produce knowledge. So if you want to produce knowledge, and probably as in physics, you must be risky and you accept to develop models, even in a very normative way. And I'm a little bit anxious these days in economics. There is a really empirical turn who is probably working well to give short-run recommendations to policymakers. But I'm not sure if the life cycle of this empirical trend is not like a gadget, more or less, who will disappear. I think we still have to fight, especially here, we are at the university, to have people really, even to pay this with taxpayers, etc., to have the best ones, to give them the chance to develop new models. And then to submit these models to measurement, experiments, and to look if it works or not. But the main difference with physics is, even if you reject the model in economics, there is a competition to maintain the models. And I have the feeling that sometimes more in physics, if the model, Einstein after Newton, etc., Newton becomes part of history of science. And there is a general acceptance that, okay, we made a step forward. And in the corpus of several theories in economics, there is this debate. It's not absolutely the same way of progress. And I'm also, on the other side, I hope we will never come to this situation, is that we all come to a same way thinking. To have a common language about several things, that's wonderful. But not the same way thinking. If we are coming to a same way thinking of one way of organizing the world in economics, etc., I'm not sure if this will, in a very long-run perspective, the future of a human universe. You must accept to do several things. And this brings me back to the models. And I say this sometimes in other places. This is self-critique. Sometimes we are too lazy with the models. We have these models, they work quite well, and so we use them again, and okay. But it's too much work to change them in the policy, monetary policy, economic policy, etc. But why not trying to see outside, I say always, see outside the box and to accept to do this. But probably behind all this, there are other social, political conditions, etc. This make all this very, very different and difficult. But still, to this question, really maintain this, and through cliometrics or economics, what I try to say is really, there is another point, is really important. Theory, metrics, but metrics is mathematics, statistics with all the data, and please never forget this history. And I come back here to Poland. If you want to understand and explain the history of your country, if you forget history with different analogies, it doesn't make sense, even for the future, because behind all this, you have a culture probably next to me, but also different to me. And all this must be in the model and must be a consideration, is the result of a history. And I hope you will never forget this identity as others. This makes us humans, more or less, in the process. My short reply to that.
Thank you. Professor Heller, another one for you. The most important sentence in your presentation, for me, was this one. If biological evolution exists, at least on one planet, the laws of physics that govern the universe cannot be arbitrary. My question is, does the fact that biological evolution and intelligent life can disappear from the surface of one planet, let's say Earth, change anything about this conviction, this belief that the laws of physics are not arbitrary? Because I'm absolutely certain that even if we cease to be, certain physical processes were there. That's something that I don't have any problems with accepting. But what about arbitrariness or non-arbitrariness of these laws?
First of all, I think that your choice, the most important sentence in my talk, was correct.
Thank you.
I think that indeed it should be stressed that the life must select, so to speak, from among all possible physical laws, just the ones which admit such a phenomenon as life. But in spite of all these discussions about human place in the universe, we should be rather humble. We are not that important. It is not the human existence, at least on the one planet, which is so important, in quote, for the laws of physics. One amoeba would be enough. One amoeba, one living cell, from the point of view of physics, is such an improbable thing that the physical laws should admit such a thing. So if we cease to exist, it does not prevent to the fact that the laws of physics should be such as to admit even a short time existence of a living thing. This is my answer to your question.
Thank you. Claude, yes, of course, you can comment on.
Just one small point about this. I think that's a really important question about the arrow of time, more or less, also to explain what's going on. It's, again, a little bit provocative. I'm sure all has a life cycle, and I'm quite sure humanity has also its own life cycle. I cannot fix it, give you the dating. The question I always ask to myself is what will make us to come to an end to the life cycle? In economic terms, you would say, is it an exogenous shock or is it an endogenous shock who will bring us to the end? Don't have really the answer. Think about all this, but I'm sure also for humanity, and if I may enter your field about physics, I will think it's changed not absolutely the laws of, or what I know about the laws of physics. It just means that it's the end of the human cycle. Just that's it. But anyway, thank you.
I have a question for you too. I wonder how cliometrics change our thinking about history, or I will put it in a different way. How this difference put into our thinking about the past by cliometrics can change our thinking about the future. What can we learn from the history, taking cliometrical perspective? How can we approach the future, knowing more about the past if we use your field?
Okay, I will try to be short. I will say 5 points. The first is referring to your first question. The interest of cliometrics is to do economic history with theory, and especially economic theory, but could be other forms of modeling. Sometimes when I define cliometrics, I say it's the quantitative projection of social sciences in the past. That means also to fix the complexity, as in physics, to understand the forces, and to bring also the human and social sciences in relation with the natural sciences. The second point that was really important is to accept, now with the change about the current revolution of all this going on, to accept to use all the best methodological tools, metrics available in all the fields, and especially in the natural or natural sciences. And this is what economics is doing, especially with mathematics, but also using all this theoretical physics and other things you can do, but adapted to the field. The third point is really important for us as economic historians and for the others, is the trend is going on with the big data. And we already did this. At the beginning of Clio, that was national accounting and other things. Is bringing to the society, to all of us, as much as data possible to have an information to test several things in models. And this is done also, that was mentioned in the previous panel, about through experiments in the labs and the field. There are other types of experiments, that also experiments for history. And to learn a little bit from the past, to make some analogies and to try not to replicate the mistakes from the past. But if you don't want to replicate the mistakes from the past, you have to know the past. And that's also a main point. And what is going on with Clio is also to accept to do some counterfactuals. That's often done also in macroeconomics, and to try to, scenarios, to build some scenarios, and to make the difference between reality and the counterfactuals you build. And my 5th point, I would say here, I would say also to accept, to kill the myths. To kill what had been accepted as true in the literature, in the discourse, in the textbooks, and all you want, and try to continue to produce knowledge and reformulate several things who have been accepted as true. That's wonderful. And that's the case, but that's also the progress of science, because they are dated. And here I'm really Popperian in several things. If you are working on a topic, accept to work on a topic and try to do as falsification as much as possible and do better. And probably also we had this with artificial intelligence and something else. They can also help us to do better in terms of data and other things. I just don't want to be myself as a human the tool of the intelligent artificial intelligence. I don't know what the future will be, but anyway, like this is probably also science fiction. But these are several points that could be useful. And at the end, the most important point is never forget this historical framework, because at some point it's too easy. And I think we have really to fight that all this this continuity is still in the curricula at the university level and all the other level. If we don't do this, we're becoming a society who will be just in the short run and very technical. But probably also, as I mentioned, Smith, etc., where morality will disappear and other values. Values are really important for me, as I mentioned, with empathy and other things will probably also disappear if we don't do this. So, but this is in a short summary. I think what Cliometrics could be as an interesting point, as not more than the others, but an additional point who could help all of us to progress in our wish to do science. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Heller, I want to confront you with a question about a possibility of life on other planets. Can the anthropic principle help us with formulating an answer to this question about possibility of life on other planets in our galaxy or in other galaxies?
Very short answer would be that anthropic principle in principle has nothing to do with the life on other planets, because I already said it would be enough to have one living cell on one planet only in order to wonder how it is possible, and it would be the amoeba principle in cosmology. Well, of course, this is a little bit simplistic answer to that question, because if you are pondering the problem of the existence of biological life in the universe, then on the one hand, we see that there must be a very, very fine tuning in the initial conditions, values of various physical parameters and so on. So we could say that it is the existence of life is a very improbable effect. So this would be an argument that it is not very frequent in the universe. But on the other hand, there is equally convincing or equally inconvincing argument that the universe is so huge that even small probability events are realized some place, and it would be a very strange thing if we are alone in such a big universe. And I must say that myself, I like to say that I don't know something, and I don't know whether there are some other living creatures in the universe. And I must say I like not to know, because when I know, I may be false. It may be false. And when I don't know, the full spectrum of possibilities just open and for investigation. So I do not know, and I think that at present this is more or less the problem for observational data to solve the problem. It was not possible 50 years ago when Brown-Carter was formulating his anthropic principle. But now we are looking for planets, for various planets. We are looking for, not for life for the time being, but for the conditions which are ruling in a given planet, whether the life would be possible there or not. So let's be open and let's wait and let's just do more research.
Of course.
May I? Yeah.
Yes,
thank you
yes,
so much.
go on.
I had also the feeling about this there is an ongoing debate, even in astrophysics, by several guys who say, we have already a planet. Should we not engage much more effort to save our planet than to try to really to build, to go to Mars at this stage? But I'm not the best to say this, probably, or competent enough to say this, but that's a wonderful dream, but that's far to be reality, and really reality. So I think even here there's a debate, and this brings us back again. I try to link to the human universe and the decision making again between what we want and how, if you accept all this, how do you are you good enough to convince the other to follow you in the decision, and what is the best decision about this? And this is sometimes very difficult, and if I'm right, this brings us back to psychological problems and other things on humans. And for myself, I say probably the best. What we really have to do is to change the humans, but anyway, to find the right solution. But so that would be my point, and I have the feeling there's an ongoing debate with the scientific progress, always to see further, to do this with progress, with the future of humanity, but on the other side, who is quite far away from reality. But if you don't have dreams, all of us at each level, you do nothing, never. And this is probably also a paradox about the evolution of this process.
I totally agree with you that we have enough problems, enough number of problems here, but there are also thinkers and writers who would say that if consumption, selling and buying is possible on another planet, then we would already be there. Because capitalism would just force us to go there.
Can I
yes,
say something?
Of course.
The problem whether there is another biological life somewhere in the universe is a difficult problem. But whether there is an intelligent life in the universe is an easy problem. Because looking what happens on our Earth, we can have doubts whether intelligent life exists at all.
Dear all, I have few more questions, but I do not want to dominate this discussion. So I would like to invite you, if you have any questions, this is the perfect moment.
Hello. So, upon pondering on the question of the humanity's place in the universe and of the human universe in general, I thought of something that would unite both the economical and cosmological aspect, that is the future of humanity. Because in the way as I see it, there are practically two variants. So the outward variant, how I perceive it, is that humanity is going to expand ever further and further, trying to reshape the nature to fit the needs of humanity. So we are this expanding, ever-expanding species. And in the inward variant, humanity is focusing more on its biology, perhaps on things like virtual reality and artificial intelligence to achieve perfection, for example, reshaping ourselves and creating more intelligent machines and artificial intelligent forms. My question is, from the standpoint of cosmology and from economy, perhaps even from a personal view, which one of these future variants seems more likely? Which one of these variants seems more promising, and which one seems more menacing to you? So, in the outward variant, I would see that humanity is expanding outwards, for example, to other planets, and further reshapes the way Earth looks to grab more resources, to become more powerful, to spread.
Wait, you know what? I'm sorry, I have to, walk around you. I will just try to understand what you're saying and then transmit it to because it's absolutely impossible from this place to understand anything. So go on.
So in the outward variant, humanity is ever expanding, for example, to other celestial bodies, and it is colonizing other places in the universe to become more powerful, to grab more resources. And the inward variant, it is focusing more on its biology. So in the way, for example, the biological engineering can allow us to reshape our bodies, focusing on artificial intelligence and virtual reality to create new forms of intelligence which are not biological. So my question is, which one of these is more likely from the perspective of economy and cosmology? Which one is more promising and which one is more daunting?
All right. So I'll try to summarize the question. There are two possible variants suggested by gentlemen. And which of these variants is more probable from the perspective of cosmology and economy? And the variants are whether we will try to conquer other planets and we'll try to find our way to use for example, resources available there, or are we going to focus on further expansion of our possibilities to change our bodies, for example, to transform our life biologically, using also tools provided by artificial intelligence. If I understood correctly, that's what I heard from you.
I have also two variants in answering that question. The first variant is what we should do. So it's a normative question. And the second one is what we will do. And what we should do is very difficult to answer, just like that. But what we will do certainly something which is more stupid. Because history it teaches us that our choices are not very wise. Well, but it's a little bit of a joke, but seriously, we should just register these two possibilities and think about them. I think there is no direct answer for that. Perhaps the answer could be that we will do both of them. Conquer the universe and work on our bodies, our intelligence, artificial intelligence, and so on. Well, and perhaps both of them are very strongly linked with each other. What we discover in conquering the universe, then it is implemented in our earthly technology and so on. So, in fact, we have no choice but do both things.
Thank you for the question. I have no real other argument about this. Run several scenarios, and probably if I make an analogy, that reminds me to, as we are working like a firm, should we becoming bigger, an internal evolution or an external evolution about this, and try, you know, something, the truth is always in equilibrium, and you know, humans are not always in the equilibrium. So I really hope you will not have one crazy guy or crazy guys who will make, so again with the decision, wrong decisions, who will engage all of us for a wrong or negative future about this. I'm quite positive. As I say always, try to think positive. And if you are looking again through history, human history was always a problem of war, of crisis, of difficult periods, all we had, but we always were strong enough to find a solution. So if you are still think positive, you can say, okay, we will again find a solution for the next, but with this idea at the end, I'm quite convinced, but this is only me, that there will be an end one moment in time, and that's part of our own human history. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right. There and there.
I see a third possible scenario for the future, that is, we go extinct. Do you see any existential risks for humanity in the future to predict? And if so, which ones, according to you, are the most important? Thanks.
Was that heard enough? Did you hear it? Yeah. No, the third possibility, according to the questioner, is that we'll go to extinct. And what was the exact question? Could you repeat it? Do you see the existential risk that it will happen? Do you see, from the perspective of these two disciplines, right? From the fields, or just in general? Do you see the existential risk that we will actually extinct when you analyze first the cosmological problems and economic problems nowadays?
Of course, there is always such a risk. It is enough to have one stupid dictator which has a power, access to the atomic bomb. So the risk is always.
This is also more or less what I mentioned. Is it endogenous or exogenous who will more or less kill us? And as I told just a few minutes ago, as I say, you know, I'm always on the light side of the force. So I'm sure this will, in the short run, this will not happen. And in the long run, we are all dead. So I don't want to do any prediction about this, but sometimes I'm just anxious of what will be the next generations. But just being positive, and this is also why we are fighting and why we have to transmit it to the younger generation, all this vision to fight for the future. And I think if you are looking with the ongoing topics about several things, the younger generations, the students I see, and all this generation, they are ready to fight, and they are here to fight for maintaining the life cycle of humanity. But as mentioned, you never know don't know how to define atomic bomb or something like this. Is this an exogenous shock? This is also the result of economic war or something like this who will bring us to an end. But let's be positive for this. Thank you.
Thank you. The question was here.
I'm not convinced that quantum physics breaks the rule that we can think about the world without thinking about our thinking about it. What really interacts with a quantum state is not our thinking, but our instruments. And it is not necessary for them to be steered by a human observer. They may be steered by a computer as well.
So the statement is that the person who asked the question is not convinced that quantum physics actually makes us stop thinking about the process. As you said, that when you approach the problem you study, you work on from the perspective of quantum physics, you do not think about thinking. I can't repeat the exact words you expressed. So the person who asked the question is not convinced that that happens because it doesn't necessarily be that we actually do the thing. It's not the question about our thinking. It's the question about our instruments, and this instrument can be used by a computer in the same process of analysis, for example.
This is mostly a historical question, because the idea that the observer, that the thinking observer, is a necessary condition for doing quantum measurements was von Neumann's idea. He wrote a textbook on quantum mechanics at that time, very classical works, in which he argued the so-called observer interpretation of quantum mechanics. But nowadays, I think it's only a historical opinion, but the current idea, the current praxis of physics is that it's enough to have observers which would be intelligent, artificial intelligent observers, or simply physical measurement instruments which play the role of observers in quantum mechanics. So there are some people who still now defend this observer interpretation of quantum mechanics, but this is a rather marginal part of physical society.
Thank you. I have one more question for both of you. Quentin Meillassoux, a French philosopher, has proposed with a serious intent. He was quite serious about it. It was not a joke at all. He proposed the category of extra science fiction. Extra science fiction. With this term, he covers texts, literary texts, in which worlds, different worlds, function based on laws that are not assumed by science as we know it. So the physics there has nothing to do with what we know about physics. Mathematics there has nothing to do with what we think, how mathematical laws should, or rules, formulas, should work. The processes that appear in these worlds are nevertheless possible to grasp and describe, although they cannot be explained by us when we use our scientific tools. According to Meillassoux, taking this kind of fiction into account can help us explore areas of the past or the universe to which we have no access at the moment. What do you think of this proposal? And this is actually a question about the possibility of the world somewhere there in one of the galaxies where these laws of physics work in a totally different way.
Sometimes, from time to time, I'm reading science fiction books, and as I remember, I only met twice books which would qualify for the extra, how it's called?
Extra science
science fiction. One was a book of a Polish writer, I think his His name was Wiśniewski or something like that.
Snerk Wiśniewski.
Yeah, and he tried to present a world in which completely different laws of physics are working, and he did that very, very cleverly. So, for instance, he said that the laws is more or less the same, but the coefficients in these equations are different, and he probably computed that, and there are very funny effects which, well, just playing in this world. Some laws were changed in a more pronounced way. But it turns out that it's very difficult to write such a book which would have completely nothing in common with the present world. Because our imagination works just by recomposing elements of our experience in different patterns, which are unusual patterns. But we are in fact unable to create something really completely new elements, new something. This is why, for instance, mathematics could lead us much further than our imagination, because mathematics create the worlds which we never suspected that existed. For instance, quantum mechanics. We would never invent ourselves. This was one example. Another example, just I forgot what was another example. Let's skip it.
One is really enough.
Well, perhaps it will come again back to me. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. 2 points who came to my mind with this question is really interesting. I mentioned at the beginning with geometrics the counterfactuals. And this is really the counterfactuals. And what I try to present in a very pedagogical way is counterfactuals of facts. But there is also another way, who is much more disputable, is the counterfactuals as science fiction, more or less, or to reformulate history in another way. If I may say this here, etc., what would be humanity now if Germany had won World War II? And several things in the era of time. And here you can make some models of science fiction. And it don't came to my mind, but I think it's in Penguin Press. There is an Italian woman also for physics who recently published a book introduced for astrophysics. We should reconsider all the laws in physics with these counterfactuals. She's in Oxford, I think, but I forgot her name. And this is also quite interesting. And at the very beginning, I told you, I think this is our job, to accept to have people on the theory side, even if sometimes it's the wrong way, but you have to think outside the box. This is for me thinking outside the box, being risky about this, because probably it brings nothing, but it can also be the beginning of something totally new in managing the world and, as you say, physics, what we know, and between the very small and the very big, there is still the link to do, even for humanity in terms of laws. So imagine outside our things, and yeah, this brings us forward to continue to work and to imagine sometimes crazy scenarios. And if it doesn't work, you reject it. But you continue to do this. And these counterfactuals, I think that makes really, really sense, even in addressing the problem of causality in the very long run, because this is just the extension of causal relations that we try to explain, and not to fix only. You did this at the very beginning when you spoke about correlations, and then we try to have some fictive explanations, but who is maybe often wrong in several things. So that would be my answer to, or some comments about your question. Very difficult one. Thank you.
You have the other example.
I have my second example. It's, of course, Dukaj. He wrote, he's a Polish writer, and he wrote a book about science fiction, but the universe was governed not by the laws of present physics, but by the laws of Aristotelian physics. And it was a very funny book, because, for instance, in Newton's physics, classical physics. When we apply force to a certain mass, the mass is moving with a certain acceleration. And in his approach, the force was proportional to velocity, was proportional to force. So it was not acceleration, but velocity. And it was very, very fun effects. Even some cosmic travels were ruled by Aristotelian physics, and they navigated through the ether and so on. So it was a very, very funny book.
Thank you very much.